Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first annual Trauma Recovery Coaching Summit, sponsored by the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. I'm Bobby Parrish, and I'm the Executive Director of the association.
And I'm Sarah Parrish, and I'm the Deputy Director.
We're so glad that you're here to join us for these 5 days of interviews. We really look forward to just unpacking so much information about trauma, recovery, and trauma recovery coaching. Just as a quick trigger warning, make sure and practice excellent self-care during all of the videos, as they could be triggering.
Thank you, Bobby. So today we have the honour of interviewing Kimberly Weeks, and she is here to talk to us today about surviving narcissism, intimate partner abuse. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So can you start us off and just let us know what is partner narcissism, partner intimate abuse, and what does it look like?
So, intimate partner abuse is what I like to call the systematic eroding of a person's identity for the purpose of exploitation, abuse, and a person getting their needs met through that individual who is the victim. So the whole point of narcissism and intimate partner abuse is that the person is literally preying on another human being for the purpose of extracting whatever they desire from that person, whether it be financially, whether it be emotional needs, whether it be an image that they want to portray to the world, whether that be sex. That's the situation in which you would find someone who is a narcissist, who is preying on a person, and then the outcome of that is intimate partner abuse. It looks like many things, to be honest with you. It can look like, specifically with narcissism, it can look like a parent and child. It can look like a person who is a boss and a subordinate. Specifically in intimate partner abuses, it's situations in which there is a romantic relationship between two people, and they both or one of the people enters that relationship believing that it is a truthful, honest exchange of intimacy with the other person. The abuser and or narcissist, and we use those terms interchangeably, actually sets out to dupe another person for the purpose of extracting things, or what we call getting supply from that person, supply of energy, supply of resources, etc. So that's how intimate partner abuse looks. A person who has narcissistic personality disorder, or what in some instances are called antisocial personality disorder, that person is a person who has a set of criteria that looks a little bit like a lack of empathy. It looks like using other people. It looks like a high thought of themselves, an inflated ego. It looks like a person who's manipulative, deceptive, etc. So when you get a person who believes they're in an honest exchange of relationship together with someone who is a narcissistic abuser, it is a setup for intimate partner abuse.
Yeah. And the way that you talk about it, I can start to understand why this is so hard for people to leave that kind of a relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. The dynamic that's set up is that in the first phase of that relationship, there's something called the idolization phase, or the love bombing phase. And that portion, everything that the narcissist wants to portray to their partner, they literally mirror everything that you say that you want. They mirror every desire that you have. If you are a single parent, they're a hero swooping in to be a good what's the right way to say it? A good parent, a co-parent with you. If you are a person who just lost one of your parents, they're a comforter. If you're a person that just lost a job, they're rescuing you. So it creates this kind of love bombing phase where they pile on flattery, compliments, support, financial resources, everything that you think that you desire from a relationship. They mirror that to you, and they set up this high, almost this high experience of love and appreciation. And then what happens is, after the idolization phase, they devalue you, and it goes into devaluation. In that situation, the person begins to erode and unpack everything that they just set you up to expect from them in relationship. So it's almost like they built this tower and now they're tearing it down relationally. That comes with all kinds of abuses, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, the withdrawing of affection, a term called gaslighting, which is to make you question the reality that you're experiencing. Like, you may have something occur and they'll say, nope, that never happened. They may say something very heinous to you that's very, very hurtful based on your relationship, and they'll deny they ever said it. So that devaluation phase sets up a high and a low, highs and lows cycle in the relationship, which creates kind of a loop. And eventually you become addicted to that loop. Eventually, the highs create almost what we talk about in psychology is an oxytocin release in your brain, with dopamine and all kinds of wonderful things, chemicals release body, feel exhilaration and all of that. And then the lows create a lot of fight or flight, where you have cortisol dousing your brain on a regular basis. And those two extremes start to create this environment where you actually become addicted to the cycle of abuse with that person. And what's amazing about it is it's intentional, it's systematic, and it's set up for the purpose of controlling a person mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Wow.
I never realized it was that cycle of behavior, Kimberly, would play with your brain chemistry such to the point that it would create an addiction.
Yes. And many survivors, or many people who are in abusive situations, when they first try to leave the abuser, find themselves rushing back to that person, feeling like they can't not respond to their phone calls or texts, or reaching out to that person who has hurt them incredibly. And the reason that's happening is because they're actually going through a chemical withdrawal in their brains. They're actually coming off the abuse. And that cycle is asking for those same chemicals to be released.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that that's happening, you'll ascribe that to love and, oh, I need to just give that person another chance, or, all of those things where you feel like maybe I've done something that, I can do something to fix it. All of those things are going on in your mind, but in your brain tissue and in your brain, chemicals are being asked for because you've been in a pattern of releasing them on a cycle.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Who knew that was what was happening? I know, it's pretty amazing. And it's frustrating now that I'm aware of this. It's frustrating when I see people tear down victims of abuse and call them names, or they're stupid, they deserve it, that type of thing, because both the person who is the survivor is probably unaware, unless they've done a lot of research, and many of us do, that that's what's happening chemically in their bodies. But also it is a complete turning the tables of responsibility for what's taking place and placing that responsibility on the victim.
Absolutely. So if someone finds themselves in a kind of abusive relationship, what is the one kind of thing that they should really kind of know?
If a person finds themselves in an abusive relationship, they should know that they have choices. I personally have been in an abusive intimate partner narcissistic relationship. And one of the things that happens in that abuse cycle is you start to believe that you have no control over what's going to happen. You're stuck. You're at the mercy of that other person's choices and what they do or don't do every day. And you've been fooled into giving away your authority. You've been fooled into giving away your power. And so the one and most important thing that anyone who is currently in an abusive situation needs to know is to have that restoration that they have choices. They are not helpless. They may be in a situation where they need to find some support systems outside their relationship, but they have the ability to choose to set boundaries for themselves out of respect and honor for themselves, and to get the support they needed to accomplish that.
Yeah, you know, that makes me think about how our society tends to put down the victim and say, you know, it would be, why don't you just leave? Right. It would be so simple. Just pack a bag and go.
Right.
But the way you're talking about it, I get a clear understanding of how that's really not all that easy.
It's very difficult. I mean, we have domestic violence shelters for a reason. I think what's interesting about this type of abuse, it's not a black eye. It's not scratches or blood. There's nothing physically outside. I'm not saying it can't lead to physical abuse, where a person's hitting you or harming you physically. But most of what people experience in psychological abuse, intimate partner abuse, narcissistic abuse is going on inside their bodies. And what's incredibly tragic is that the impact of continual cortisol release, that constant state of fight or flight, that constant fear, living in a fearful place, actually begins to have physical impact on the inside of your body. Many people who have experienced narcissistic abuse or intimate partner abuse complain of somatic symptoms, migraines, different autoimmune diseases, different kinds of cancers that develop. So while it's not outwardly physical, what happens in our thoughts and in our minds has an impact on the inside of our bodies. And so it is still a physical kind of abuse. And most people don't associate that because they can't see it on the outside. But for many survivors, their medical bills can tell you the story of what they have, the impact that that abuse has had on them. And it's incredibly difficult to leave. And that's one of the great things about coaching. That's one of the great things about therapy. That's one of the great things about having a solid support system around you, which, you know, narcissistic abuse, one of the hallmarks is that person tries to isolate you from anything that could keep them from controlling you. So there's all kinds of resources available to people. And that's one of the reasons I became a trauma recovery coach.
I'm wondering, as you're talking, Kimberly, how, you know, one of the things that we as trauma recovery coaches do is that we work with a lot of clients who have been abused as children.
Yes.
In my head, I'm seeing a lot of connections between childhood abuse and what the abuser does to groom the child. Yes. With what happens in an adult intimate partner relationship. So I'm wondering, does that mean that people who were abused as children fall prey to predators more easily?
It depends on several factors, but yes, I would say generally speaking, we are more vulnerable to relationships that mirror and are familiar from what we experienced in our childhood, for sure. A lot of what happens in relationships can train you differently. So a person may have experienced that in childhood and may, find a securely attached person and have a completely separate experience. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say that what happens with mothers and with fathers in the early attachment and continuous relationship with that person sets them up for what to expect in relationship and how to attach and what boundaries are okay in adult relationships. And more than often than not, what ends up happening is we marry our mother or we marry our father.
Yeah.
Effectively, in terms of wherever we got the framework that it was okay for someone to treat, talk to, or touch you a certain way. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're working with someone who is in an abusive relationship, what should we tell them, or how should we help them in terms of breaking free?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. There's many steps. The first part of it is really becoming aware that you're in an abusive relationship. Many people, because of what happened in childhood, aren't even calling it abuse. They're calling it disagreements. They're calling it, oh, well, that's just, that person's in a bad mood, or I did something wrong, or the first step is really becoming aware that you are definitely absolutely in a situation of abuse. Without that acknowledgement, it's very difficult for that person to even see the need to break free, honestly.
Yeah.
The next part of it is getting with someone, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, whether that's a pastor, whether that's a friend that's very close to you, who can support you as you start the process of walking through the necessary changes within yourself that are going to be required to break free from that abuse. Most people think, oh, it's just easy. You just get up and, like you said, pack up and you can leave. The first place to start packing is on the inside.
I love that.
Unless you are in a situation in which someone is physically harming you on a regular basis, it is going to require a lot of looking at who you are, how you see yourself, where you learn certain patterns of behavior, in order to have the strength to go through that withdrawal from the abuse cycle. It's going to take a lot of that. And most of the clients that I'm working with, it's a 3 to 6 month period where we're literally walking through those questions. How do you see yourself? Are you helpless? Are you a victim? Are you powerless in this? Is that how what internal tape is playing for you every day? And then we go to looking at, okay, what's happening currently and what decisions can we make to secure your heart and your mind so that you have the possibility of healing. Because if you're taking regular assaults, it's going to be pretty difficult, verbally, mentally, emotionally. It's going to be pretty difficult to see yourself any differently than where you've arrived. And then once we have that awareness and we start getting the support system together with a team of people that can help start to make the necessary transitions, we really do start to say, here's where we start to set some boundaries that cannot be crossed. And if they continue to be crossed, here's your exit plan. And that's what I do with women. And it takes time to do that. It takes the regular happenings of life to look at where all of this came from and where are we presently and where are we going to go? Where are you going to go as an individual? One of the things I love about coaching is that, first of all, it's not cookie cutter, but also it's a situation which the person already has all of the answers on the inside of themselves. They know who they are at their core. but it's been covered up with all of these different instances and environments and words and behaviors and withholding and all of those things. And over time, they've just gotten a distorted view of it. So as coaches, we really get to walk people through rediscovering, or sometimes discovering for the first time, the beauty that's on the inside of them, which is an amazing honor for us to get to do.
I love that. And I know that I've read some places that for women or men who are leaving an abusive situation, that it can be really dangerous.
Absolutely.
So what do you do to help your clients safeguard themselves and any children that they might be
Absolutely
leaving the relationship?
Yes, the first thing is we almost have to do a threat assessment. If there has been previous sexual abuse, if there has been previous physical abuse, if there has been previous controlling or, putting someone in a position where they can't leave their home, we've got to bring law enforcement into that situation. The next part of it really is, once we do kind of that immediate threat assessment, we start the process of building that support system again after awareness, because your support system, whether it's your parents, whether it's siblings, whether it's people, in your community, in a church, in your school, your coworkers, are people who literally are witnesses to what is taking place with you. And so it's selecting a group of people who can really kind of be accountabilities for you and what's happening in your home. And especially with children, then the young ladies that I have worked with, we literally have a parent come stay in the home with that person as they're making their exit, so that they are not alone with the abuser as they're starting to set these boundaries for themselves. If that's not possible, then we set up an exit strategy for them to get out of the family home and take their children somewhere safe, and then reassess what to do at that point with, housing and all of the rest of those things. But it's an interesting dynamic, because a lot of the threat is mental. It's not necessarily going to be physical. And so the shoring up is more of that you have choices, you have authority over your life, you get to make those choices, and then starting to give them some support tools to walk that out.
Yes. That's one of the tenets of trauma-informed care, is giving our clients voice and choice.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Kimberly, this has been amazing. I have learned things today that, as a professional in the mental health field for 20 some years, working with trauma survivors, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I am so grateful that you've shared with us today. If any of our listeners or watchers want to connect with you, where do they go?
They would go to my website at Kimberly Weeks, and that's like days of the week, WEEKS, coaching.com. And I'm also on Facebook as the same hashtag, Kimberly Weeks Coaching. I'm also on Instagram at Kimberly Weeks Coaching. I put a lot of resources on my website and put a lot of support tools and experiential support tools on my social media, specifically so people can start to say, oh, what is that term? What's a flying monkey? What's love bombing? What's gaslighting? And they start to be able to identify behaviors or situations they're finding themselves in. So yes, that's where I can be found.
That's great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for today. And I hope everybody else is enjoying the summit. And hope to see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.